All right, let's dive into some ancient wisdom. We're looking at excerpts from the Dhammapada, which is kind of like a cheat sheet for living a good life.
Yeah, think of it as like the Buddha's greatest hits,
Exactly.
compiled after he was gone, offering advice on how to navigate, all the ups and downs of just being human.
And even though it's thousands of years old, it's still relevant today.
Surprisingly so.
So how does a text from that long ago still apply to us today?
Well, while it's a key part of the Buddhist tradition, the Dhammapada speaks to something universal about the human experience.
So it's not just for, like, monks meditating on a mountaintop. It's for everyone.
Absolutely. It's about understanding, ourselves, our minds, and how our thoughts actually shape our reality.
I like the sound of that. So let's jump into these excerpts and see what nuggets of wisdom we can find.
Okay, sounds good.
The Dhammapada opens with this line: "Phenomena are preceded by the heart, ruled by the heart, made of the heart." Whoa. I mean, that's connecting our minds to literally everything around us.
It is, isn't it?
Yeah. It's kind of both fascinating and intimidating at the same time.
It is. It's a
Yeah.
statement that definitely makes you stop and think.
For sure.
What it's saying is that our experiences, all of our experiences, are actually shaped by our minds. Happiness and suffering aren't just things that happen to us.
Yeah.
They actually come from our thoughts and actions.
Okay, so we're not just like passive passengers in life. We're the ones driving.
That's a great way to put it.
Yeah, so we actually have more agency than we might realize.
Exactly. And that's where this idea of karma comes in.
Okay, so karma, I've heard of that word before.
You probably have.
What does that really mean?
Well, it basically means that actions have consequences, and it creates these, ripples that shape our future.
Okay.
It's like every thought, every word, every deed that we do influences who we become and what we experience.
So if our actions shape who we are, our minds are kind of like architects, designing our own happiness or our own suffering based on like the blueprints of our thoughts and actions.
That's a great analogy.
And the empowering part is that we can change those blueprints, right?
Yeah.
We can choose different thoughts, make different choices, and ultimately change the course of our lives.
We can, absolutely.
That's pretty cool.
It is cool.
So how do we do that? Where do we even begin?
Well, the Dhammapada emphasizes heedfulness, which today we often call mindfulness.
Okay, so being present, being aware.
Yeah, it's about being present and aware of our thoughts, our feelings, and our actions.
So heedfulness, it seems to be like the key that unlocks everything else in the Dhammapada.
I think so.
Yeah.
It's central to the path that's laid out in the text.
Okay.
It's the difference between, kind of sleepwalking through life and actually being awake to what's happening both within us and around us.
I see.
Yeah.
And there are consequences to both, the heedlessness and heedfulness?
Absolutely.
So what are those?
Well, heedfulness or mindfulness leads to the deathless, which refers to nirvana.
Okay.
It's the ultimate goal in Buddhism, which is a liberation from suffering and, the endless cycle of death and rebirth.
And so heedlessness kind of keeps us stuck in that cycle.
Yeah, heedlessness leads to more suffering. It's like blindly reacting to everything, being tossed around by life's winds.
Yeah.
The Dhammapada compares a heedful person to a strong tree
Okay.
that can withstand any storm.
And a heedless person is like a flimsy twig that gets blown over by the slightest breeze.
Exactly.
That makes a lot of sense.
Yeah, and the text has these really vivid images that stick with you.
Yeah.
Another one is the heedful person is like a fire, advancing, burning away all the things that hold them back, while the heedless person is weighed down by them.
Yeah, I like that.
Yeah.
So thinking about heedfulness in daily life, what are some practical ways that we can cultivate that? What works for you?
Well, it can be really simple.
No.
Like paying attention to your breath, noticing the sensations in your body as you move, really listening to what someone is saying without letting your mind wander.
So it sounds like cultivating a sense of presence, even in the midst of like a chaotic day.
Exactly. And the more you practice, the more you start to see the choices that you're making, the ones that lead to more suffering, the ones that lead to more freedom.
I like that.
Yeah.
That makes a lot of sense.
Yeah.
Which brings us to another really central idea in the Dhammapada, which is the contrast between the path of the wise and the path of the fool.
Yeah, the text doesn't hold back on this one.
No, definitely.
It really distinguishes between these two paths and their consequences.
So who is this wise person that the Dhammapada keeps mentioning? What makes them so wise?
Well, for one, they have mastery over their senses and desires.
No.
They're not ruled by, every impulse or craving that pops up.
Oh, that's something I definitely struggle with. Shiny objects, phone notifications, you name it, I get distracted.
We all have our weaknesses. But the Dhammapada reminds us that real freedom comes from understanding those desires and not being controlled by them.
So it's about getting behind the wheel and actually steering, not letting the desires drive us wherever they want.
Exactly. The wise person also speaks and acts thoughtfully.
Okay.
They're not impulsive or reactive.
Mm-hmm.
They cultivate qualities like virtue, discernment, and self-control.
So they think before they speak.
Yeah, they do,
Right.
Which is a good reminder for all of us, right?
Yes, definitely.
The Dhammapada is full of these little reminders.
Yeah.
And it's not about being perfect. It's
Right.
about striving to, make choices that are aligned with wisdom.
That makes sense.
Yeah.
So the wise person isn't swayed by praise or blame. They're not seeking validation from others.
No, they're not. Their inner compass is strong.
Okay.
It's guided by the Dhamma,
Which means?
which means truth or righteousness.
Got it. I love how the text uses some beautiful imagery to describe this wise person.
Oh, yeah. Like what?
Well, they're like a deep, clear lake, completely undisturbed by the wind.
Yeah.
Or an island that no flood can submerge,
Yeah, secure and stable.
But those images, really evoke this sense of peace and resilience.
They do,
Which
yeah.
qualities of this wise person, resonate with you most?
That's a good question.
Yeah.
For me, it's equanimity.
Yeah.
Being able to stay balanced and centered no matter what's happening around you.
Mm.
And it's not about suppressing emotions,
Right.
but about not letting them control you.
So it's like having that inner strength to kind of weather any storm.
Exactly. And the Dhammapada is clear that cultivating these qualities is a journey, not a destination.
Yeah.
It's a path we walk step by step.
It's a practice.
It's a practice, not a perfect arrival.
And speaking of things that require practice, the Dhammapada has a lot to say about the allure and the dangers of craving.
Oh yeah, craving's a big one. It's a major theme throughout the text,
Mm.
and it's often presented as the root of suffering.
Which is interesting because our entire culture seems to revolve around craving.
It really does, doesn't it?
Yeah, getting people to want more, buy more, do more.
Exactly. But the Dhammapada shows us the other side of that coin,
Hey,
how craving can lead to these endless cycles of seeking and dissatisfaction.
it's that feeling of, I'll be happy when.
Yeah, I'll be happy when. Fill in the blank.
Exactly.
It can be fueled by attachment to really anything, material possessions, sensual pleasures, ideas, even beliefs.
Yeah, I feel that the Dhammapada uses some really powerful metaphors to drive this point home.
Oh, yeah.
Like craving being this creeping vine that blinds us to suffering.
Yeah.
Or a monkey in the forest.
Constantly seeking fruit.
Yeah, constantly searching, never finding that lasting satisfaction.
Never satisfied.
Or a rabbit caught in a snare,
Mm.
hopping around in circles, unable to escape.
Yeah, those images, they really paint a picture of how frustrating and ultimately kind of pointless it is to chase after things that can't bring true happiness.
Totally. So
Yeah.
instead of trying to satisfy all of our cravings,
Right.
the Dhammapada is saying, no, uproot them, get rid of them.
Uproot them, yeah.
So it's not about feeding the monster. It's about figuring out how to tame it.
Exactly.
Right.
And that requires mindfulness.
Okay.
Seeing craving for what it is, a source of stress and pain.
Not a path to happiness.
Not a path to happiness, right?
That's a powerful shift in perspective.
It is.
So if craving is a problem, how do we actually uproot it? What's the solution?
That's where the Dhammapada's teachings on mindfulness and wisdom come in.
Okay.
It's about cultivating, a deeper awareness of our thoughts and feelings, seeing the impermanent nature of everything, and recognizing that true happiness doesn't lie in chasing after those fleeting pleasures. It's a journey inward.
It's about finding that, peaceful lake within ourselves instead of letting the storms of craving, kind of rule our lives.
Exactly. And speaking of journeys,
Yeah.
the Dhammapada introduces this concept of the true Brahman.
Now, I know in Hinduism, Brahman refers to a specific caste,
Right, right.
but here it's different.
It's different.
Yeah.
In the Dhammapada, it's not about your social status or your family lineage. It's about spiritual attainment. Anyone, regardless of their background, can become a true Brahmin.
So it's like a title you earn through your actions and your mental development.
Precisely.
Okay.
And the Dhammapada outlines specific qualities of a true Brahmin.
Okay, like what?
Well, they live ethically,
Okay.
refraining from harming others. They've moved beyond attachment to material possessions and social status.
So they're not chasing clout or the latest gadgets?
Definitely not. They focus on inner riches,
Okay.
cultivating kindness, patience, and wisdom. They're free from anger and conceit.
It sounds like they're living the opposite of what our current culture values.
In many ways, yes, but the Dhammapada reminds us that these qualities are the true source of happiness.
So they've like tapped into this deeper wellspring of joy that doesn't depend on those external circumstances.
That's a great way to put it.
So what steps can we take to cultivate these qualities in our own lives?
Yeah.
I mean, it's not as simple as just deciding to be kind, right?
No, it takes effort
Yeah.
and intention.
Okay.
But the Dhammapada offers guidance. It emphasizes, mindfulness,
Right.
ethical conduct, and cultivating, wholesome mental states.
So it's like training our minds, just as we would train our bodies
Yeah,
for physical strength and agility.
I like that. It's like a mental gym for the soul.
Yeah, like that.
Like physical training. Consistency is key.
Small daily actions can lead to, like, big transformation over time.
That's the essence of the Dhammapada's message.
I think we've covered a lot of ground in this first part of our deep dive into the Dhammapada.
We have, and there's still so much more to explore.
I know. Before we move on, I just want to remind you that we're, distilling key takeaways from these excerpts for you.
Right.
If any of this sparks your curiosity, we encourage you to dive deeper into the full text.
Absolutely.
Discover its wisdom for yourself.
Yeah, it's an incredible journey.
It's a journey worth taking.
It is. It really is a journey worth taking. And speaking of journeys, there's this chapter in the Dhammapada called Blossoms.
Okay.
And it caught my eye,
Okay.
though it's not actually about flowers.
Mhm.
It uses them as like this powerful metaphor.
Okay, I'm all ears.
Okay.
How do flowers fit into the wisdom of the Dhammapada?
Well, flowers are, they're beautiful,
Yeah.
but fleeting, right?
Right.
They represent that impermanent nature of everything, especially the things that we tend to cling to.
Like those shiny objects that we were talking about earlier.
Exactly, the things that distract us from what truly matters.
Okay.
The Dhammapada uses this image of cutting out the blossoms of Mara
Right.
to symbolize letting go of those attachments that keep us kind of stuck in suffering.
And Mora being like the ultimate tempter.
Yeah, the embodiment of all those things that lead us astray.
Got it.
This chapter also highlights the importance of discernment,
Okay.
that ability to see things clearly without being blinded by our own biases and preconceived notions.
So it's not just about letting go of everything. It's
Yeah.
about being wise about what we choose to hold on to
Yeah,
and what we choose to release.
exactly. There's a verse that compares a wise person to a skilled flower arranger, someone who knows how to select the right teaching for the right moment.
That's a beautiful image.
It is.
Like we're creating a bouquet of wisdom.
Yeah.
Choosing the teachings that best nourish us at any given time.
I love that. That's a great way to think about it. It's about, finding the wisdom that's most relevant to our own unique journey.
So it's not about blindly following rules, but about applying wisdom in a way that makes sense for our own lives.
Precisely. And that requires a certain level of self-awareness,
Okay.
being honest with ourselves about our strengths and weaknesses, our tendencies toward heedlessness or wisdom.
Speaking of tendencies, the Dhammapada isn't shy about describing the pitfalls of foolishness.
No, it's not.
There's a whole chapter dedicated to it, right?
There is, yeah. And it's not exactly sugar-coated.
No.
It paints a pretty stark picture of, what happens when we live heedlessly, driven by ignorance and delusion.
No, it's not the most uplifting chapter.
No, it's not light reading,
Good.
but it's meant to be like a wake-up call, a shake out of complacency, kind of message.
Okay.
It shows us the consequences of living on autopilot, of not paying attention to our thoughts and actions.
What struck me in this chapter was like how fools seem completely oblivious to their own faults.
Oh, yeah.
It's like they're blind to their own blind spots.
Yeah. And that's a dangerous place to be.
Yeah.
The Dhammapada warns that that fools are their own worst enemies, constantly creating suffering for themselves and others.
Yeah, there's also that verse about how even if a fool spends their whole life with a wise person,
Right.
they still won't understand the Dhamma.
Yeah, like a ladle that never tastes the soup it's serving.
It's a powerful image.
It is.
It highlights the importance of being receptive to wisdom,
Yeah.
of actually applying what we learn, not just like accumulating knowledge without embodying it.
Exactly. So it's not enough to, to just read the Dhammapada or even listen to this deep dive.
Yeah.
We have to put these teachings into practice in our own lives.
And that takes effort.
It does.
It's about cultivating those qualities of the wise person that we talked about.
Yes.
Self-control, discernment, mindfulness.
Yes, and it's an ongoing process.
It is.
The Dhammapada reminds us that, we all have moments of foolishness,
Right.
moments of wisdom.
Yeah, it's about recognizing those moments and making
Yeah.
choices that align with the path of awakening.
Exactly. And speaking of awakening,
Yes.
the Dhammapada has a whole chapter devoted to those who have achieved it.
Okay.
The awakened ones, also known as Buddhas.
So this is where we get into the really mind-blowing stuff.
You think so?
Yeah, the insights of those who have seen beyond the veil of illusion.
Exactly. This chapter is full of these profound teachings about the nature of reality, the path to liberation, and the qualities of an awakened mind.
One of the verses that really stood out to me in this chapter is, hard the winning of a human birth, hard the life of mortals, hard the chance to hear the true Dhamma, hard the arising of awakened ones.
That one always hits home.
Yeah.
It's a powerful reminder of how precious this opportunity is,
Right.
We often take our lives for granted. But the Dhammapada, it urges us to wake up and recognize the incredible potential that we have.
It's like we've won the cosmic lottery just by being born human.
We have.
Yeah, and the Dhammapada is giving us the winning numbers to unlock even greater happiness and freedom.
It is.
So what are some of the key insights that this chapter offers about awakening?
Well, for one, it emphasizes that awakening isn't something that just happens to us passively. It requires effort, discipline, and a willingness to really look deeply into the nature of our own minds.
So it's not about sitting under a tree and waiting for enlightenment to strike.
Definitely not.
Okay.
It's about actively engaging in practices that cultivate liberation, things like mindfulness,
Okay.
ethical conduct, and developing wisdom.
So it's about consciously walking the path, not just hoping to stumble upon it.
Exactly. The Dhammapada also highlights the importance of letting go of attachments to material possessions, to sensual pleasures, to views and opinions.
So it's recognizing that clinging to those things ultimately leads to suffering, even if they seem enjoyable in the moment.
Right. True happiness doesn't come from, grasping onto things that are constantly changing, but from finding peace and contentment within.
And there's also this strong emphasis on compassion and kindness in this chapter.
Yeah.
The awakened one is described as someone who has put down the rod toward all beings.
That's a beautiful image of non-harming and loving kindness.
It is.
It reminds us that true awakening includes not just our own liberation, but a deep care for the well-being of everyone and everything around us.
So recognizing our interconnectedness,
the
fact that we're all in this together.
Exactly, and that's a powerful antidote to the individualism and self-centeredness that our culture often promotes.
Yeah, it's about shifting from me to we.
Precisely, and the Dhammapada doesn't just talk about these lofty spiritual ideals.
Okay.
It also offers practical guidance on how to navigate those everyday challenges of life, like dealing with difficult emotions. For example, anger.
Oh, anger. That's one I definitely need help with.
The Dhammapada has a whole chapter dedicated to it.
It does.
It does, and it offers some really helpful advice on how to work with anger skillfully without letting it control us.
I'm all ears. What does the Dhammapada say about taming this fiery beast?
Well, for starters, it emphasizes self-control.
Okay.
It's about recognizing when anger arises and choosing not to let it dictate our actions.
That's easier said than done.
It is.
Especially when you're in the heat of the moment.
It definitely takes practice.
Yeah.
The Dhammapada compares it to a skilled charioteer controlling a chariot.
Really?
The wise person is like that charioteer, able to rein in their anger and steer it in a more skillful direction.
So it's not about suppressing anger completely, but about learning to manage it wisely.
Exactly, and that requires mindfulness.
Okay.
Being aware of the thoughts, the feelings, and the bodily sensations that accompany anger.
So noticing those signs before we erupt like a volcano.
Precisely. The Dhammapada also suggests using positive emotions as antidotes to anger,
Oh.
like, conquering anger with lack of anger, bad with good,
Okay.
stinginess with generosity, a liar with truth.
So consciously cultivating like qualities of kindness and patience and generosity to counteract those fiery impulses.
Exactly. It's like building up an inner arsenal of goodness to help us respond more skillfully when anger shows up.
I like that. It makes it feel more doable, like something we can actually work on.
It is.
Yeah.
And the Dhammapada, reminds us that it's an ongoing process.
Yeah.
No one is entirely faultless or entirely praiseworthy.
We all have moments of both.
We do.
It's about like striving to live ethically and skillfully, but also recognizing that we're all works in progress.
Absolutely. And being kind to ourselves in the process.
Self-compassion.
Yes.
It's so easy to beat ourselves up when we make mistakes.
It is. The Dhammapada encourages us to be more understanding and forgiving toward ourselves.
Yeah, it's about learning from our mistakes and using them as opportunities for growth rather than getting stuck in that self-criticism.
Exactly. And that's where mindfulness comes in again. Being able to observe our thoughts and feelings without judgment.
Okay.
To see them as they are without getting caught up in stories or, negative self-talk.
So it's about cultivating a kind of inner observer, a wise and compassionate witness to our own experience.
That's a great way to put it. And this leads us to the heart of the Dhammapada's message.
Okay.
The path to liberation, the way out of suffering.
The path that leads to the deathless, to nirvana. There's a whole chapter on the path, right?
There is.
Okay, walk me through it. What does this path look like?
Well, the Dhammapada starts by emphasizing the importance of understanding the Four Noble Truths.
Those are kind of the foundational teachings of Buddhism, right?
Exactly. They're like the cornerstone of the whole path.
Could you remind me what they are again?
Of course. The first noble truth acknowledges that suffering is an inherent part of life. The second tells us that this suffering arises from our clinging and craving. The third offers hope, stating that it's possible to end suffering.
Okay.
And the fourth reveals the path to that liberation, which is the Eightfold Path.
So it's like a diagnosis and a prescription for the human condition.
Yeah.
First, we acknowledge the problem, then we understand its cause, then we realize there's a solution, and finally, we're given the tools to achieve it.
That's a great way to understand it. It's a very practical approach.
It is.
And the Eightfold Path is that set of tools.
Okay, give me the Eightfold rundown.
All right. Right view, right resolve, right speech, right action, right livelihood, right effort, right mindfulness, and right concentration.
Well, that's a lot to remember. But basically, it's about living ethically, skillfully, and mindfully.
You got it. It's about aligning our actions with our deepest values, with our aspiration for awakening.
Okay.
And the Dhammapada makes it clear that this path isn't about blindly following rules.
Yeah, it's about cultivating wisdom and compassion in every aspect of our lives.
Exactly. And that takes effort, right?
It does.
The Dhammapada compares it to a warrior battling against Mara, that embodiment of temptation and delusion that we talked about earlier.
So it's an inner battle against our own negative tendencies.
Exactly. But it's a battle worth fighting because the rewards are immeasurable. Freedom from suffering, lasting peace, and ultimately liberation from the cycle of birth and death.
That's a pretty compelling motivation to get on the path.
Absolutely. And the Dhammapada offers lots of encouragement and guidance along the way. Yeah. One thing it emphasizes is the importance of finding wise companions, people who can support us on our journey.
That makes sense. It's easy to get discouraged or lost along the way.
It is.
Having wise friends, mentors, or teachers can make all the difference.
Absolutely. The Dhammapada also talks about making an island for yourself.
What does that mean? Building a fortress to hide from the world?
Not quite.
Okay.
It's about cultivating inner strength and resilience. It's about creating a space within ourselves that's not easily swayed by the ups and downs of life.
So it's more like building a sanctuary for our hearts and minds.
Exactly.
Yeah.
A place where we can find refuge from the storms of, craving, aversion, and delusion.
I love that image.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And the Dhammapada reminds us that this path isn't about becoming someone else.
Okay.
It's about discovering our true nature. The wisdom and compassion that already exists within us
So it's about uncovering the Buddha within.
Beautifully said. And that brings us back to the concept of the true Brahman,
Okay.
which we touched on earlier.
Right. Yeah.
This chapter explores it in more depth.
Right.
We talked about how it's not about caste or social status.
Right. It's about spiritual attainment.
Exactly.
Yeah.
It's like an honorific title for those who have achieved a certain level of wisdom and purity.
So they're like the real deal.
Yeah.
They embody the teachings of the Dhammapada.
Precisely. And the Dhammapada challenges us to consider, how we can cultivate those qualities in our own lives.
It's like a call to action, an invitation to like step onto the path of awakening and embody the wisdom that we've been exploring.
And to remember that this path is open to everyone, regardless of their background or circumstances.
That's a powerful message of hope and possibility.
It really is. The Dhammapada is a timeless guide to living a life of wisdom, compassion, and freedom.
I think we've covered a lot of ground in this second part of our deep dive.
We have.
And there's still more to uncover in the final part.
There is.
Before we move on, I just want to remind you that we're offering just a glimpse into this profound text.
Right.
If you're intrigued by what we've discussed, we encourage you to dive deeper into the Dhammapada and discover its wisdom for yourself.
It's a journey that can transform your life.
We've talked about this path to wisdom and, some of the pitfalls that we might encounter along the way.
Right.
But the Dhammapada doesn't just like lay out these abstract concepts. It gets really practical about the challenges that we face on this path, especially when it comes to craving.
It's true. Craving is like a recurring theme, almost like a persistent antagonist in the story of our lives. And the Dhammapada really drives home this point that craving is this powerful force that can keep us bound to suffering.
It's like that sticky spider web.
Yeah.
The more we struggle against it,
right,
the more entangled we become.
Exactly. And the imagery that the Dhammapada uses is so vivid. There's that verse about craving being like a monkey in the forest.
Oh, yeah.
Constantly searching for fruit, but never finding that lasting satisfaction.
Like the rabbit caught in the snare.
Right.
Just running in circles, unable to break free.
Those images really perfectly capture that feeling of frustration and futility that can come with being trapped by craving. And the Dhammapada's message is really clear. True freedom comes from understanding and ultimately uprooting craving.
Not from trying to satisfy it.
Not from trying to satisfy it, right?
Which is a pretty radical idea, especially in our consumer culture.
It is, isn't it?
We're constantly bombarded with these messages that tell us that happiness comes from buying this product, achieving that goal, constantly wanting more.
Yeah, always wanting more.
The Dhammapada offers a powerful alternative to that mindset. It suggests that true happiness isn't about accumulating things or chasing those external achievements,
right?
But about cultivating this inner peace and contentment.
Yeah, finding that contentment within.
That sounds amazing in theory, but is it actually possible to escape the clutches of craving? I mean, it feels like such a deeply ingrained part of being human.
It's definitely a practice,
okay,
not a quick fix.
Yeah.
The Dhammapada really highlights the importance of mindfulness.
Okay.
Paying close attention to our thoughts and feelings and recognizing the impermanent nature of everything.
So if we can see that everything is in constant flux, nothing lasts forever,
right,
then we're less likely to get so attached to things that will ultimately only cause us suffering.
Exactly. That's where, wisdom comes in. The Dhammapada encourages us to develop discernment, that ability to see clearly and make choices that align with our deepest values.
And speaking of choices,
the
Dhammapada also talks about the kind of lifestyle that supports this path to awakening.
It does.
There are chapters on monks and Brahmins, which suggest a very specific way of living.
Yeah, but it's important to remember that these chapters aren't just for people who, wear robes and live in monasteries.
Okay.
They're about cultivating those qualities and practices that support, spiritual growth, regardless of our external circumstances.
So even if we're living in the real world with jobs, families, and all those responsibilities, we can still cultivate these qualities.
Absolutely. The Dhammapada emphasizes ethical conduct, mindfulness, and developing wholesome, mental states. These are universal principles that can be applied to any situation.
There's a verse about restraint of the senses
Okay.
that really stood out to me.
Yeah.
It says that mastering our senses leads to liberation from suffering.
That's an important one. And it's not about denying ourselves pleasure or living a life devoid of, sensory experiences.
Right.
It's about finding balance.
Okay.
Can't letting our senses control us.
It's about being mindful and intentional about, how we engage with the world around us,
Yeah.
both physically and mentally.
Precisely. And along with restraint, the Dhammapada emphasizes contentment. It's about appreciating what we have rather than always striving for more.
Because that feeling of lack, that I'll be happy when mindset, that's a recipe for suffering.
It is. We end up on this endless treadmill of wanting.
Totally.
Yeah, it's exhausting.
Yeah.
The Dhammapada